battle against the government for greater autonomy in their region.
This isn't the first time that the president has met his army generals since the start of the crisis in the country. But his statements tell a great deal about his confusion, and it's clear that he has been inspired by Gaddafi's speeches.
But thousands of young Yemenis who have taken to the streets across the country have totally different demands. The departure of the regime. Demands waved off by Saleh's ruling party as illegitimate.
It won't be an Egyptian-style change. It won't be a Tunisian type of change. But unfortunately, if it goes to become very close to what's happening now in Libya, then I don't by any means rule out the possibility of an international and regional intervention here.
For these protesters, the movement has come a long way, inspired many Yemenis and made sacrifices that calls for dialogue by the government are too late. But if the president is determined to cling to power, the opposition and the anti-government protesters say they will muster more men here in the capital and across the country to put an end to what they describe as an autocratic regime. Hashim Al-Barra, AlJazeera, Sana'a.
Still to come on Al Jazeera.
I'm Rob Reynolds in Hollywood, where it's Oscar night. And we'll tell you who's going home carrying one of those little gold statuettes. Academy Award results coming up next.
And now that the initial drama of Egypt's revolution is over, a second act is being written. But will the slogans of a popular uprising be lost in the translation of a new constitution?
Hello again. Brazil again is looking very, very wet at the moment. On the satellite picture, you can see this bright white cloud here that's all gradually making its way northwards, and it is making its way up towards parts of Venezuela and Colombia. Torrentially heavy downpours there, and another clump of cloud there making its way through parts of Peru. Now, many of these countries have already seen some flooding, and it looks like the wet weather will continue as we head through Monday. Heavy downpours again, particularly in the northeastern parts of Brazil here, but also the rain's now pepping up down towards Rio and Sao Paulo once more as well. For Buenos Aires, though, here it should be dry and pretty hot. Our temperatures making it up to around 30 degrees. As we head towards the southern parts of Africa, there's lots of wet weather here at the moment. Still very heavy downpours there across many parts of Madagascar. Then that crosses through parts of Mozambique and all the way across into Angola. Torrential downpours out of that. The heaviest are going to be here in the east. Further south, that's where it should be a lot drier and brighter. Durban there will get to around 28 degrees during the day, and that's 82 in Fahrenheit. Now here in Doha, there's been a fair amount of cloud, a couple of spots of rain recently, and it looks like it will still be a little bit grey at times on Monday. The cloud, though, does get thicker as it works its way eastwards, and it does turn to snow there over parts of northern India and Afghanistan.
Welcome back. Let's recap the top stories here in Al Jazeera now. The cities closest to Libya's capital have been seized by anti-Gaddafi protesters. But demonstrators in Zawiya believe Libyan troops on the outskirts are preparing a counterattack. Tunisia's interim prime minister has stepped down. Al-Baji Qaid Sebsi will succeed Mohamed Ghannouchi, who resigned on Sunday. It follows renewed violence in the capital, Tunis, prior to his departure. Opposition parties in Yemen say they plan to join anti-government protests in a bid to pressure the president to step down. This comes after President Ali Abdullah Saleh met his army generals as he tries to shore up his grip on power. Well, it's a showcase of the best in the film industry. The 83rd Annual Academy Awards has just come to a close. Well, besides being a celebration of the year's best films, the Oscar red carpet is also one to watch for. Film stars, producers and directors gathered at star-studded event at the Kodak Theatre in Los Angeles for the Oscars. which is one of the major events in the movie industry calendar. Well, also on that red carpet right now, suitably dressed, Rob Reynolds. He's in Hollywood to find out more about the winners. Who is going home smiling, Rob?
Well, everyone associated with the King's Speech has got a reason to be pretty happy tonight, Sammy. That film won both Best Actor, Best Screenplay, and its star, Colin Firth, won for Best Actor. This was, of course, a historical drama set in the 1930s as Britain approached the Second World War, and it was the story of the unexpectedly elevated to the king. To the king's throne by a man who had a serious speech impediment, managing to overcome that in order to do his duty, and also overcoming the self-doubts that he brought with him into his royal position. The Best Actress award won by Natalie Portman. She had been heavily favored for her harrowing portrayal of a ballerina who was pushed literally over the edge of madness, even as she achieved an artistic triumph in the film The Black Swan. For Best Supporting Actress and Best Supporting Actor, two actors and actresses from the same film, The Fighter, and that was Melissa Leo, who played the ferociously ambitious mother of the fighter, played by Mark Wahlberg, and his brother was played by Christian Bale, and Christian Bale also came home with an Oscar for that portrayal. So really not too many surprises here in Hollywood. These outcomes had been expected, and so it is what we kind of think of as being a classic kind of outcome for the Oscars, where this film with a happy ending and an uplifting story, a kind of standard historical drama with very strong performances, was the film to win over the Academy, instead of more edgy films like 127 Hours or The Social Network. Sammy?
Well, let's talk a little bit about that. What is going on with the films? Is it just me, or does it seem that the happy ending is not as frequent as it used to be? Is that like the post-financial crisis depression sinking in, or what?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of, the zeitgeist there is being seen in these films that we have for 2010. Really very dark films like Black Swan, like Beautiful, which was nominated but did not win the Best Foreign Language category. You also had The Social Network, which has a very ambiguous sort of moral message. All in all, these films were a tinge darker than what we've grown used to seeing in Hollywood, and certainly not the kind of popcorn, blockbuster, special effects kinds of things that we saw in years past. For example, the last Oscar carried away by the blue-skinned aliens of Avatar. So we may be seeing something of a change of mood. Having said that, of course, Sammy, I have to say that the highest grossing film of the year was an animated feature called Toy Story, which was something for the kids and not for the adults. So you have a little bit of both in this year's picture.
Even some adults enjoy that one. Rob Reynolds from Hollywood, thanks. Renewed fighting in Côte d'Ivoire's commercial capital, Abidjan, has forced people there to flee the city. Battles have raged for a week between forces loyal to the incumbent president, Laurent Gbagbo, and those allied with opposition leader Alassane Ouattara. Cuban government supporters have confronted a group of dissidents calling for political change. The so-called ladies in white were staging their usual Sunday demonstration when government supporters surrounded them and started shouting insults. Well, the women are mostly the wives and mothers of political prisoners jailed in a 2003 sweep against intellectuals and opposition figures. New Zealand's Prime Minister says 2 major earthquakes since September are likely to cost about $15 billion. Last week's quake in Christchurch killed at least 148 people. At least another 50 are still missing. Funerals are being held for some of the victims on Monday. Large parts of the city have been reduced to rubble. In Chile, thousands of people have gathered to mark 1 year since a massive earthquake struck the country. Thousands of families are still living in temporary shelters. President Sebastián Piñera has been facing growing criticism over the speed of the reconstruction. Mark Orchard reports.
A pre-dawn vigil at the epicenter of the magnitude 8.8 earthquake. The keynote to a national day of mourning for all the victims and their families. In the coastal town of Constitución, bells tolled and the names of the dead were read out.
To be here along with all the other families is incredibly painful. Incredible, but you need to know how to stand up.
President Sebastián Piñera has been touring the disaster zone with the message that his government is sparing no expense to rebuild.
As we observe the first anniversary of the catastrophe which struck our country, the reconstruction has been solid, and we have achieved very significant progress and accomplishments.
The country's main highways are nearly back to what they were before the quake. But building new housing for the displaced has been slower. In this camp, residents who lost all their possessions are still waiting for a grant to build a new neighborhood.
We are suffering here. We don't have water for the house. The truth is that there's been a lot of shamelessness here. That's the only way to describe it.
We are all suffering from depression here. This is going nowhere.
Opposition politicians blame the lack of progress on the right-of-centre government's decision to privatise most of the construction work.
The government cannot continue to accept poor workmanship in the service of the public. The methods they have been employing in the Biobío region are absolutely outside the law and public morality.
Piñera concedes that the work is running behind schedule, but his government says it will accelerate the outsourcing of work to private companies. Mark Orchard, Al Jazeera.
Still ahead here in Al Jazeera, more on the uprising in Libya as anti-government protesters capture more key towns close to the capital, Tripoli.
If you're a Nokia user, you can download Al Jazeera's news widget from Nokia's Ovi store. The news widget, available on compatible Nokia devices, gives users quick and easy access to real-time news updates from Al Jazeera English. See the world in real time. Al Jazeera Mobile.
As protests, violence, and the call for political reform spreads across the Arab world, Al Jazeera's in-depth coverage of events on the ground brings you the news as it breaks. Ongoing coverage of the Libya uprising on Al Jazeera.
The Golan Heights, one of the spoils of the 1967 war, home to 20,000 Israelis and source of 1/3 of all Israel's water. But what of the Syrians left behind? With families torn apart and all borders closed, they come to talk to their loved ones across the Shouting Valley. Across the Shouting Valley on Al Jazeera.
Information travels in many ways. Opinions constantly formed. Knowledge passes in an instant.
If you want to communicate with those shaping the headlines, this is your chance to ask questions directly to the people making the news. Riz Khan, at this time on Al Jazeera.
It's 5:30 GMT. I'm Sami Zaidan, and this is Al Jazeera. Let's recap the top stories. The city closest to Libya's capital has been seized by anti-Gaddafi protesters. Demonstrators in Zawiya say they're waiting for Libyan troops on the outskirts to launch a counterattack. Tunisia's interim prime minister has stepped